Is today, but really we're going to give you an overview of what college athletics looks like as well, from the perspective of the athletic director as well as the university. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to have an opportunity for Q&A, a little question and answer section after the event, after the slideshow ends. Gives you a chance to find some answers that you might not ask otherwise. You know, we'll get some answers to some questions. So if you would, just make your way to a seat. Those that are standing up, we'll get started here. We'll fill this place in pretty good. Do not let the echo throw you off.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
What?
You'll. Those of you who have been here a while remember the Rose Bowl event that we had at the basketball game when we TCU wins the Rose Bowl. They bring the Rose Bowl executives back. Mike Sinkfield will remember this, and the echo through remember the Rose Bowl trophy ceremony at the basketball game where the echo threw her off and she couldn't finish her sentence. It was a lot of fun. We're gonna have fun tonight with that though. All right, let's get started. If you would, please welcome the athletic director for TCU. Been here, 17 months?
18, but who's counting?
Yeah, 18 months. Mike Buddie's with us, ladies and gentlemen. And this was, I'm going to be candid with you, this was Mike's idea. He wanted a chance to stand in front of you and kind of be transparent about where things are at TCU, where college football and college athletics are headed, and how obviously the importance of the fan base grows exponentially in this new world order that we're in right now, okay? So why don't we dive right in? You want to hit that video to kind of get us started, Kyle? Let's get in the right frame of mind, if you don't mind. All right, never gets old. How about that, huh? Yes. Here's where we're headed tonight. We're going to recap last season with you, okay? We're going to talk about some of the successes, some of the areas for improvement that you had at TCU. We're going to talk about, as we mentioned, the college landscape and NIL. We're going to get into some future projects that are on the horizon as far as TCU athletics is concerned, and then our Q&A section at the end. And you'll note there are some, I'm not going to call them rules. I don't like the word rules, but everything is open for discussion here. And Mike is going to be as transparent as he can be. There may be some things, you know, if you want to know specifics about a contract or things like that we can't share. But for the most part, you're going to try to be transparent with everything. And I think before we kind of roll into the deck, Kyle, Mike, if you would kind of set the tone for us as to your first 18 months, what you've seen, what you've experienced, and where we are right now.
Well, thanks, Brian, and thank you all for making time after work or, you know, in the middle of your afternoon to be here. As Brian mentioned, I wanted to do something like this because what I know is in the absence of information, people create their own. And there are so many half-truths, quarter-truths, some full truths out there in college athletics right now. I wanted to design something that really will kind of set the tone, as Brian said, but then just be open to taking your questions. And as Brian said, I want to be as transparent as possible, but there are things that are going on that I wish I knew how much Baylor was playing their shortstop, but I don't. And they're not going to share that. And so I don't share it with them either. In terms of the first 18 months, what a place to be, and what a weird time to be here. So my wife Tracy and I moved here last spring. Fort Worth has been everything we hoped and more. TCU has been everything we hoped and more. College athletics can't seem to get out of our own way. So I'm hopeful as we pursue solutions out there, whether it's the government stepping in or if we actually finally step up and clean up our own mess, if and when we get back to business as usual, there's no better place to be than TCU, and there's no better place to live than Fort Worth. And if you think back to when there was some semblance of order to what we did, the last 12 times that TCU played the University of Texas, TCU was 8-4. And what that told me when I was interviewing for the job, and what I've learned now that I've been here, is we don't need to have a fair fight, but if it's close enough to fair, our 16 head coaches, our assistant coaches, and the young men and women who wear the Horned Frog purple, they'll find ways to win. We've just got to get some realistic version of how do we move forward as an industry with some level of fair play. There are certainly advantages out there, and frankly, some of those teams have earned those advantages. There's nothing wrong with having the biggest budget in college athletics. Build the best facilities, hire the best coaches, pay them the most money. We just think you shouldn't be able to pay 4 times more for student-athlete talent than others. So a lot to cover. We'll get on it. I love this slide up here because we'll talk a lot about the challenges and the mess that college athletics has made of ourselves. But at the end of the day, we got some student-athletes in the room that continue to exceed expectations. 33rd in the Learfield Directors Cup. That's the highest finish we've ever had. Just proud of those 3 head coaches, and you could argue that there were 6 or 7 of our 16 coaches that deserved to be named Coach of the Year. 3 of them got that honor, 4 conference championships, and the best is ahead of us. So really excited to be here. Thank you all for coming. Let's get on with it.
Yeah, and by the way, you even talked about in the meeting we had leading up to this at 33rd in the Directors Cup, awfully proud of, but could have been better.
Yeah, we left points on the table, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's dive right into what the biggest stage looks like. I mean, you look at postseason, which really is an expectation you have for every program, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, looking back to the past 3 years, when Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12, a lot of people said, well, that's a different Big 12. And I said, you're damn right it is, and TCU should be at the top of it. And we are able to resource through a lot of our staff and my teammates that are in the room, we're able to resource our programs to compete for Big 12 championships. And if you're competing for Big 12 championships, you should be in the national discussion. And we fell 1 sport short. And let me just go ahead right now and say, every team that was able to participate in the postseason last year at TCU participated in the postseason, except for baseball. And what I loved about that experience, as painful as it was, Kirk Sarlos took a long, deep, hard look at where we were and where we need to be and made some really difficult decisions. Shuffled the deck a little bit. I love the additions that he's made, and I'm as excited about that program this year as any. And those are Kirk's expectations and my expectations. So, yeah, we should be in the NCAA tournament in every sport that we represent. I'm committed to that.
Yeah, a couple of NCAA runner-ups. You had the big win over USC in the Alamo Bowl, the momentum that carries over from that, from the men's basketball, women's basketball, and postseason. Those things just continue to build on each other. We spent a lot of time talking about all the challenges that are out there in the world of college athletics, yet somehow TCU this year seemed to do okay.
Yeah, more than okay. And I'm looking at Tony and Dwayne over here, 2 of the best coaches in college basketball. We went up there to South Carolina. We took on this upstart Division II, I guess they're Division I, this little program, Ohio State University, and took care of business, and then gave Duke all they wanted and more. So really excited for all of our kids. A couple of young ladies in here that we were joking that, hey, the Elite Eight is the minimum standard for women's basketball, and that's the credit to Mark Campbell over there. And before Mark kills me, I will say, it's impossible to get to the Elite Eight, and it's really impossible to do it back-to-back years. But what he's building is amazing, and he'll tell you, it takes a village, and a lot of the village is in this room tonight, and that's part of what we're here to talk about, is how do we sustain success into this next iteration of Horned Frog athletics.
Yeah, great run by Rifle. Obviously, what tennis has done under David Roditi has been pretty spectacular, but it's not just winning games. That's an important part of it. Here's the cool thing about TCU. Look at this. 115 graduates in 2025-26, 200 student athletes with a 3.5 GPA or better. They're still student athletes.
Highest cumulative GPA in the history of the department. Sean Worthen, who couldn't be here tonight, just does an amazing job relating to our young people, being the adult in the room. I think back to my college days. I had an advisor named Doug Bland. Doug Bland kept his thumb on my neck and said, go to class, pass these classes, pass your credit hours. You're going to need this degree, because I thought I was, King Tut about to take on Major League Baseball. And thank God that Doug was the adult in the room, and Sean Worthen provides that for us, and really proud of these accolades. I also just want to highlight that last little piece there, because it's really important in this day and age. You read about student athletes playing for 4 different schools over 4 years. I just think that's shortchanging their college experience. I spent 3 years at an institution, led me to my future wife, friends that will last me a lifetime. And while these young people are making a few more dollars going from A to B to C to D, I just think that we're doing them an injustice if we're not providing them everything possible. And what we've learned is we can sometimes keep student athletes here at a discount through programs like this. We launched the Athletic Directors Leadership Program. Ray Walls, who does a great job as our student athlete development leader, we had about 25 applicants, student athletes who want to learn about leadership, character development. He picked 12. The reward was through a semester. They read a book, they meet with me and other key leaders around campus, and they were rewarded with a trip to Nike headquarters, where Elliott Hill spent 25 minutes talking to them about industry and leadership. And one of our student athletes has earned a full-time job, and just from a trip to Oregon. So they do a phenomenal job. And again, we want to win championships. We want to create memories. But most importantly, we want them to leave Fort Worth with a degree that's going to help them find something that they're passionate about for the rest of their lives.
Can we highlight one thing? When you look at that GPA and you look at those graduates, at TCU, they're in class, in person. That's not the case everywhere today, right? No, sadly, and some schools are mandating the opposite. You can't go to class in person because that cuts into your nutrition and your weightlifting and your film study. And to me, I think that's, again, I may be Pollyanna. As a parent, that would eliminate that school from consideration. And so our coaches not only say that they're going to get a great education, they actually support it, they mandate it, and they want their kids going to class in person. And I have to give a shout out to our faculty, who are incredible, who go out of their way. As a former baseball player, every time that you travel as a baseball player, you miss Friday class, Friday class, Friday class, Friday class. And if you have a faculty member who's not supportive and doesn't help catch you up and share the notes, it can be a really negative experience. We don't have any of that at TCU. The faculty are tremendous. They bend over backwards. They hold our kids accountable, but they want to make sure that they're learning as well. I love that about it. We've got a video, right, Kyle? I want to kind of give you a perspective of what we feel are some of the highlights from this past year that makes TCU special. Check this out.
This will be a story that will be told forever.
Let's talk about TCU, actually.
Just incredible. I mean, they barely even know me. I've only been here, less than a year. So it's just been incredible to be able to know these fans, talk to them after the game, and just see their support grow throughout the whole season.
What, have you ever, is any?
Yes.
It's gorgeous.
It's like a Disney set. It's not real life.
Yeah, it's like a soundstage almost.
The Horned Frog legend Dutch Meyer, who said, "Fight him till hell freezes over, and then fight him on the ice."
It's just how close this community is, and the love that people have for Fort Worth and TCU. But I think there's more than that at TCU. People love interact with each other. It's more than sports. Academically, Fort Worth, the community. People always like come back. If you don't leave Fort Worth, you're always going to come back. You're going to support TCU.
Unbelievable, and we're so proud to be the ones that got it done. So yeah, I'm expecting a big party back in Fort Worth at some point.
First-time national champions, TCU.
The TCU community is unbeatable. Honestly, it's everywhere. I mean, we've just been so welcome since we've been here, and it honestly felt like we were home with so many fans we have.
Yes. That's what separates TCU right there, those highlights that you see. And, with the changing landscape that is out there, the success that we talked about as far as continuing to compete at the highest level as the rules continue to change, that's an everyday process. It feels like that those rules are changing. Am I right?
You're not wrong. And this is the challenge. Again, I've spoken at Rotary and I've done breakfasts, and there's always a wide range of understanding in the room. And so part of this is I want to educate those of you who care to be educated. There's a wide range of understanding of what's changing day to day. You've got Jamie Plunkett over there who's knee deep in it every day, understanding things, translating things. Not all of you are on social media. Not all of you go to ESPN.com every day. But I do want to try to help bring to light the reality of the situation that we are currently in. I'll focus on some of the challenges, but again, please don't think this is all negative, because there are a heck of a lot more people in Division I athletics who are looking up at TCU saying, man, I'd give anything to be there, than there are people that we're looking up at saying, man, they've got a few more resources or a few more advantages than we do, but I love where we are in the pecking order.
18 months ago, all we heard about was the House settlement. We don't hear about that anymore. What happened to it? Where did it go?
Well, it's there, and we're adhering to it. It's a little bit maybe optional for some people's definition, but it is still there. And the interesting thing is it has been federally approved by a judge, and as you can imagine, there are a lot of injunctions and a lot of lawsuits stemming from that legislation or litigation. But the challenge, the main pieces of that piece of legislation is it allows us to take $21.4 million, or it was 20.5 in year one, that says, hey, this is your revenue share. This is your payroll. You can pay your student athletes with this. What we didn't think was going to happen in about 45 minutes within signing of it was schools would start going grossly over that amount. Commit to this kid, sign them, offer them whatever you have to offer them to get them to commit to our school. We'll worry about the details later. Dangerous. I wouldn't sleep very well at night doing that. But what we have done, and what a lot of schools are doing, is being as creative as possible. And my CFO is sitting in the back over there. It makes me nervous, but we've been able to convert some of our athletics department budget into NIL opportunities for student athletes. We rely heavily on our Learfield multimedia rights partnership. Jay Fields and his team are in the room. They're our corporate sponsor partner. So they're the people that are in front of these corporate opportunities to say, we'd love for you to look at Avery or X-Man over here or Jaden Craig. Would you like them to represent your company in an NIL opportunity? Legitimate NIL deals, and other people are doing less legitimate NIL deals. But as I said earlier, there's a lot more people looking up at us than we're looking up at others. But we've had to eat into our own operating budget in order to try to stay as competitive as we can. We have to feed football. It is the engine that drives this department and every college athletic department. But what I love about these slides is we're not neglecting anyone. We're more competitive in tennis and rifle and volleyball and beach volleyball and basketball than we've ever been, but still able to invest at football at a really high level. But it has been a belt-tightening exercise for all of us. The Chancellor Emeritus Boschini and Chancellor Pullen have been true partners in all of this. They have gone out of their way to find ways as an institution, as a university, to make sure that athletics has everything that we can possibly need to stay competitive, and that's a blessing.
So get to the 21 million. You mentioned the fact that there was some operational expense that was shifted over. There's an increase in revenue as well, and that's where Jay Fields and his group, ticket sales, things of that nature come into play. Did that make up the entire 21.5 million?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, athletics, that's part of that $7.5 million budget hit. That's our piece of that pie. But I was at the AD at West Point, and I saw my feed, I saw Jeremiah at a podium saying, TCU is a leader in this space. We're going to be fully funded at the maximum level, and let's move full speed ahead. And that got my attention, because you would expect that from the behemoths. And I just thought how great that TCU is able, like that, to be that committed and find a solution that quickly, to be a leader. And we'll continue to be that way. So there's that two pieces. There's the rev share bucket that we've been able to accumulate and meet all of our needs of that, whatever the maximum is. I would say half of the schools in the Big 12 have had to go to donors, to other revenue streams to try to get to that starting line, where again, it's just really fortunate that TCU's already at the starting line and we can rely on everybody else to get us further ahead of the competition.
I'm curious, is everyone in the Big 12 at that starting line?
I think we all are now.
Yeah.
But we weren't all in year one.
Right. Go back to that previous slide for just a second, Kyle, if you don't mind, because I do want to point out a couple of things. You can see where we're going, and we're going to talk about these three. The Protect College Sports Act is a piece of legislation, didn't get out of the Senate before the recess. We think it'll come out of the Senate in the fall. The House is a whole nother story. Give us just, if you could, a summary of what that does for college athletics if it were to fall into place.
Well, we've got a slide on that and a couple that'll help us walk through it, but the simple answer is there's progress. Yeah. Right now, there is no enforcement. There are investigations going on, but there's been no enforcement and very few guardrails. Each individual state can make up their own rules. They can make their NIL funds tax-free, and they have. And so again, kind of some national standards, some piece of antitrust exemption, because the NCAA has always enjoyed that, which allows them to make rules. And those rules apply to the University of Hawaii and Harvard and Texas Christian. And that's kind of been challenged when you lost that exemption. There have been just so many, I feel like somebody should have a jersey patch this year that's called temporary restraining order. So yes, it's a challenge, but it's progress. It would get us closer to having some normalcy.
Yeah, I guess what I was looking for there, we're going to get into it, is it puts federal teeth behind it, federal law behind where we are headed, okay?
That's right.
Yep.
So currently, if you exceed the posted revenue share or illegitimate NIL, no one knows what that means. Yeah. I would hope it would be a 3-year CFP ban. I don't think that's going to have that level of teeth. Yeah. But if this passes and you do that, you violated federal law. And I think that's a game changer for some of these billionaires that are really excited about their teams winning. I don't think they'd be willing to violate federal law in order to have that happen.
Yeah. All right, let's find out where we're going. All right, here we go. This is the shift, if you will. And you talked about above the cap NIL. Explain that to us. What does that mean? Because where's the cap?
So the cap is the 20.5 million, or 21.3 or 4 for this year. So that's the ante. Now, to be clear, there are schools in the group of 5 and other words that they're not even funding the full ante. They're doing $6 million a year to fund their sports as best they can. But think about some of the blue bloods in basketball, Kentucky, Kansas, Duke. You can imagine what their concern is. Their concern is, what about Santa Clara and George Washington and Gonzaga that can invest all this money in basketball because they don't have to worry about their football teams? So every school is kind of nuanced in how and where they invest. There are schools with really good hockey programs. We treat baseball as our big fourth investment piece. But yeah, so the ante is the $21.4 million. We distribute that amongst our 6 ticketed sports. That's who we spread those resources to. So football, men's and women's basketball, volleyball, soccer, and baseball. Those are the student athletes that are getting the lion's share of our revenue share dollars. And then there's this above the cap. And when you read the rumor mills about SEC school that's got a $45 million payroll, what they're saying is we've put probably 17 million of that rev share money into football. And we are going to come up with, I don't do public math,
a lot. They're going to come up with a lot.
$27, $28 million of above the cap NIL deals. Well, here's what's interesting. Deloitte, as our third party person through the CSC, they have to approve every NIL deal. And the average NIL deal, Greg can correct me if I'm wrong, is about $14,000 is like the average NIL deal. And that sounds legitimate, right? Your left fielder gets a deal with Jersey Mike Subs here in town. You got Ed Small up there eating some chicken E. $10,000, that seems kind of fair. But what those schools are hoping happens is we'll get a $500,000 sponsorship for our tight end that no one's ever heard of, and $1 million sponsorship for our backup left tackle, because, as I mentioned before, they're making offers to these young people saying, come here, we'll give you $1.5 million. And so they give them $300,000 of rev share, and then they assume that they'll be able to get $1.2 million above the cap in NIL deals. And what remains to be seen is what happens on December 31st when that young man or young woman still only has that $300,000. Where's my $1.2 million? Big 10 championship games tomorrow, I'm not playing unless I get the rest of my money. Because the CSC is not going to just push these deals through. They have a rate card. They know that Rob Gronkowski is getting whatever, $500,000 from USAA to be their national spokesperson, national television advertising. Well, if Gronk, who has 1 million followers and 14 Pro Bowl seasons or whatever it was, if he's getting $500,000 for that, certainly this second string left tackle from school Y shouldn't be getting $500,000 for a local. So we'll see how that plays out. But at the end of the day, where we are is chasing legitimate NIL deals, because we have the same thing. We are offering X-Man some revenue share dollars and a guarantee that we will make our best efforts to find above the cap NIL. And thank goodness we've been successful. And what we're crossing our fingers for, and maybe this is a good segue into the Protect College Sports Act, is every portal season leads to another high level of stress for Ryan Peck, who leads our LEAP agency, for Alex Yak, who's our Frog Club director. You can see when people say it's not sustainable, you can understand why it's not sustainable. So really excited that this was pushed and supported. Senators Cruz and Cantwell worked tirelessly to try to gain support. There were some challenges, some hurdles that needed to be cleared in order for the Big Ten and the SEC to agree to the language in this bill. To everyone's credit, they got in the room, sleepless nights, deadlines, and they were able to get to where they all agreed. But there's a lot of challenges. The one thing I want to mention is, I got a glare, but I think it's the third bullet point. We all realize that this is unsustainable. We all know if we have a $21 million rev share number, but you can have pretty much unlimited fake made up NIL deals above that, where you can just funnel money to student athletes. That's not sustainable. That's not the best way to proceed as institutions of higher education as we try to compete for athletic titles. So they said, what if we add a retention pool of $25+ million? There's some specific caveats within there. And instead of saying we can pay $21.4 million, let's pay $48.8 million. Ironically, if you read the articles out there, and again, you should believe half of what you read and none of what you hear, $48.8 million is about the exact amount that some of the highest football rosters are reported to be. And so I don't think that's a coincidence that that's the number. But essentially, they say $25 million, you can take that and reward Micah and Xavier because they've been here for a year. So now we can use that pool of money to retain them. We can use the $21.4 million rev share number to attract our 2 women's basketball players who weren't here last year, but we want them here this year. And then next year, we can use our retention money for them. If that's the case, and if that's truly a cap and not a floor, then we're cooking again. We don't have a ton of confidence that that will be a cap. The language in there loosely states, it better be one heck of an incredible young man or woman to get an NIL deal above this. So Arch Manning, who is a very big name from a very well-respected family, if he gets a legitimate NIL deal above that, that's above and beyond that 48.8. But the backup left tackle from an SEC school or a Big 10 school or a Big 12 school isn't going to be getting NIL deals unless it's Livy Dunn, the LSU gymnast who had like 13 million followers when she got to college. That's legitimate. So this would help. It's not perfect, but at least, again, as I mentioned at the outset, if you go over that number and it's not a high-profile student athlete, you've just violated federal law, and that could help us.
Yeah. There are a couple of other pieces within the legislation that folks fought for. The cap on commissions for agents was important because we had heard horror stories that, some agents were charging 20, 25, 30%, right, on deals. That had to get fixed. And you had to kind of round up all these state laws, right, that were out there. You mentioned Louisiana the other night, right, and what they did in their state as far as not taxing this money, So that was like, that's free money. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, and imagine being an honest working person in that state and you're paying 32% tax, and the left tackle who's making $2.2 million doesn't have to pay tax. Yeah. Doesn't seem sound.
No. The one-time transfer rule too, I think, from a fan's perspective, I think they like that.
I think we would all love it, and we've got some student athletes, and thank you for being here, student athletes, and our Rangers and cheer and showgirls. Awesome to have their spirit in this room. It sounds restrictive to say you can only transfer one time. As I mentioned, if you're going to 4 schools in 4 years, you're making a few extra bucks, but we need more Doug Blands in the world that are being the adults in the room saying, if you transfer one time, if you didn't get it right the first time, you can transfer, don't have to sit out anything. And by the way, if the coach leaves, if there's an illness in your family, those waivers will still exist if you need to transfer again. But again, I just think it's incumbent on us to protect these young people, so when they become not so young people, they look back and say, I'm really glad I stuck with that second school and overcame some adversity. And yeah, I was a backup for 1 year. But those last 2 years were special because I knew the people, I knew the fan base, and they made some awesome memories.
The last piece on there is kind of embarrassing that we have to do that, that you have to have a law that says a football coach can't leave in the middle of a season. But we had to do it.
Yeah, and you know what? We're recording this, right?
Yeah. Other schools.
I'm not the biggest Lane Kiffin fan in the world. And he had to make, that was a really tough decision. And it's easy to sit here and say, oh, how can you leave your school in the middle? Well, if there's a dream job that comes calling, because the transfer portal opens in December, and because the school that wants you to come to them wants to take advantage of that, it's really difficult to navigate that. And so, making it legislatively no option actually probably really helps it, and it may impact when that transfer portal opens.
Add to the fact that it is America, a free market system, and many of these states are right-to-work states, so how do you tell a guy he can't leave? That's where this comes into play, right? Yeah. All right, if you can't be standing still. We've talked about that before. We talked about the reality shift and the payouts. This kind of gives you a perspective on where the conferences are right now. And walk us through this, Mike, if you would, because these numbers, they need an explanation behind them, essentially.
Actually, no, I think they speak for themselves. Speaking of not standing still.
The explanation is why, yeah, right?
So the bifurcation between these 4 power conferences, and there used to be a 5th one, if you recall, out west. If you start in 2022, the delta between the lowest P5 school and the highest P5 school was about 12 to 15 million-ish dollars, which is no small amount of money. I would take it if you offered it to me. But $15 million in the scope of things isn't crazy. 3 years later, you look at the delta between 38 million and 76 million. Again, I don't do public math, but that's a big number. And so when you read about Brett Yormark, our commissioner, trying to be as creative and innovative as possible to find ways to close that gap through different revenue streams, he's trying to help the 16 schools that represent the Big 12. I will tell you an anecdote that sounds like I'm jumping to conclusions or complaining, and I'm hopefully doing neither. There's something called the Learfield Directors Cup. We highlighted that earlier. We finished 33rd this year, which is the highest we've ever finished. So the Learfield Directors Cup measures the overall success of your athletics department. It takes your 20 best sports and looks at your results in the postseason. You get 33 points if you make it to the round of 32 in basketball. You get 58 points if you make it to the round of 16, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they just accumulate those points. So obviously, the more sports you have, the ones that don't make it to the postseason don't hurt you because you only count your top 20. For 28 consecutive years, one school won the Directors' Cup every single year. Any guesses? Stanford University. 36 sports, incredible success. That ended 3 years ago. What happened 3 years ago? You were able to start paying your student athletes. One school has now won it 3 years in a row. Any guesses? The Texas Longhorns. That damn Del Conte. So that's not a knock on Texas. They're investing wisely. They're getting a huge return on their investments, and they have the strongest start to finish, top to bottom athletic department in the country. And there's nothing wrong with that. What it illustrates is once you're able to start paying and investing in your student athletes, if you invest wisely, you have a better chance of winning. And so that's where we are as an institution. That's where we find ourselves in the Big 12. And as I mentioned, I illustrated, we had to basically eat $7.5 million of our own budget at a time where flight prices are going up, gas prices are going up, all those things that day to day we have to adhere to run our institution and our athletics department. As our TV contract goes up $1 or $2 million a year, that helps fill that $7.5 million delta, but it doesn't fill it. When you're getting $60 million a year over year, more than the ACC and the Big 12, it's pretty easy to siphon off $7.5 million to fill that little delta. So interesting times. I don't care. Money doesn't win championships. As a former New York Yankee, I used to always tell people, we should be in the playoffs every year. If I gave Brian $100 to fix a dinner and I gave Ryan Peck $800 to fix dinner, that dinner better be better than that dinner. But it's not guaranteed. And so what Sonny Dykes showed us in 2022, we were giving that quarterback, Duggan kid, pennies. Yep. And he finished runner-up in the Heisman Trophy and took us to the national championship game. So we don't lean on that. You look at what our basketball team did last year. You look at what our women did last year. They didn't have the biggest budgets in the country by far. So we out-punch our weight all the time. And every time you call on the Horned Frogs to step up, they find a way to do it. They did it when they went from that Mountain West Conference into the Big 12. They went to a Rose Bowl, and they had no chance of hanging with that monster Wisconsin team. Not only did we win, we filled half the damn stadium. A couple years later, CFP, there's no way you're going to beat Michigan. And this is another opportunity. There's no way in hell we're going to be able to keep up.
Or is there?
Bet.
Yeah, exactly.
As the kids say.
Let's put in perspective where TCU is then. All right, so we see these conference numbers. And so where are the Horned Frogs in the market? And when we talk market, let's talk our market, obviously. Big 12 is important to us, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is who we're trying to beat, right? As I said, compete for Big 12 championships, you're competing for national championships. We know how everybody in our league spent their $20.5 million rev share. And we are in the top 2 or 3 in the sports where we invest. What we think in terms of overall rosters, and this is no specific sport, it's been well publicized that Texas Tech has doubled down, tripled down. Their fan base has seized this moment and invested extremely well in softball, in basketball, in football. BYU has just a phenomenal breadth of donor base, alumni base. Arizona State now I think is up to 72,000 undergraduate students. We have 96,000 alumni alive on the planet. So a lot of our competition they're having these efforts saying, hey, if every school X, Sun Devil, if they were to give $100 a month, every month, I can't do the math. It's a ton of money. We have to be more creative. We have to be more thoughtful in our approach. But at the end of the day, there's 13 schools in our league who we think, we don't know, We think that they're looking up saying, we got to chase TCU. They're taking their ball and running away from us. So one of the things I want to point on that I'll give our coaches an immense amount of credit. We have a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old. It's a tough time to be a young person, and our kids are broke. These young men and women have a telephone in their pocket. If they wanted to download DraftKings, they could. If they wanted to put $100,000 on their game tonight, they could. Because obviously they have a direct impact on the result. All of that's really scary. There's a lot to lose. And through it all, I'm just amazed that our GPA is going up. The chemistry and cohesion of our teams is getting better. All these things that we all got nervous about, like how's this going to impact the locker room if he's making $100,000 and I'm making $30,000, but I went 3 for 4 last night and he went 0 for 4. We've managed it extremely well. And that just makes me proud.
Yeah. We're not slowing down. That's the big thing. You know, where do you go from here? And that's the next step. I mean, you think about the investment that's being made, the true value of NIL, if you will. You see the estimate there where TCU stands in the Big 12 in pretty good standing right now.
Absolutely. And again, there are carve-outs. There are schools in our league that invest heavily in a certain sport. But, you know, I'll scream it from the rooftops. Everybody needs to have $50,000 if they think they're going to come anywhere near beating David Roditi. Like, it doesn't matter to him. He's gonna teach these young kids to be gritty and find a way to win. And that's rubbed off onto Lee Walker and our women's program, who just won their first Big 12 championship. So the future is extremely bright. These are challenges, but none of them are insurmountable.
And the challenges you're not backing down from, as we talk about it, TCU not standing still in the fight, and going to continue to be that. I mean, Frogs are going to be in it. You talked about Jeremiah early on saying, hey, we're going to fully fund it. The commitment that Chancellor Pullen has made to athletics, I mean, that's going to continue as well. Your expectation for coaches, you know, as you said earlier on, you expect all of our teams to be in postseason. None of that changes based on these numbers.
No, absolutely not. And here's what I want to communicate clearly. Every penny matters. And this isn't a fundraiser, and we're not locking the doors and making you sign pledge cards. But if you own a business and you believe in these young people, I promise you, if you spend 10 minutes with them, you'll be glad that you offered them 2 free meals a month, $5,000 to do social media posts, come to your business and meet people. That's going to matter. The big deals obviously matter a lot too. But here's, if we look around the corner, if this $48.8 million thing happens, we can flush this fake NIL down the toilet, and we're back to fundraising, and we want to build an endowment, because the only way that whoever takes over for me, whoever takes over for that person, the only way the Frogs are going to be built for the future, sustainable forever, is to get $100 million in an endowment that pays off 7% a year. That's $7 million every year that we can go to close this loophole. And that endowment will grow every year, year over year over year. And $100 million is a ton of money. But we can get there. A call to action for the Frogs. They've responded time and time again. So that's what I ask. And if you can't do any of those things, buy tickets. Come to a soccer game. Those young ladies are phenomenal. Play in Alabama in like 20 minutes. Somebody needs to keep an eye on the score for us. But it matters. The problem that happens is if everybody within a fan base, and this doesn't happen at TCU or we would not be in this position, when they all look at each other and say, I'm not going to do it, you do it. How much is that guy given? That's when you get into trouble. And I'm thankful that that's not the case here.
And also thankful that it's not just about NIL as far as what you view as important to this athletic department. Go to this next slide, Kyle, because one of the things that excites a lot of folks is what the future holds. And we're not just talking about straightening out NIL and spending money on student athletes, but it's continuing to have world-class facilities here at TCU.
Yeah, and what a blessing. I firmly believe, whether it's a year from now or 4 years from now, when this kind of gets straightened back out, you know what's going to matter again? Having engaged faculty, the city where you're located, the beauty of your college campus, the facilities. If right now I had a $100 million football project that I had to execute for fan safety, I don't know where we would be. Thank goodness for Del Conte and Donati for handing me the keys of an institution with top-of-the-line facilities. Those are donor dollars that don't have to go to pay for that allow us to help to stay competitive. But we absolutely still have things to do, right? We want to shake it up at Schollmeyer Arena. We believe our students need to be behind the bench and the visiting bench. That means some people that sit behind the bench currently may be asked to look at seats on the other side of the arena, or maybe we add another row of floor seats. But those are the kind of things, if you talk to our coaches and our players, when they go to places that are really hard to play, it's because the visiting students are right there on top of them. So we're looking at that. I'm not saying we're going to execute it right away. We certainly won't do it for this fall, but we're looking seriously at doing it next season. We know there's not much premium opportunity to sit at Lupton Stadium and watch an Omaha caliber program. You're sitting in 97-degree weather. There's only 4 suites, and they're not all that modern. So we're looking at a feasibility study for that, as well as it's sacrilegious to consider losing a parking lot. But right now we have a practice basketball gym and an arena gym. And the arena gym is shared with volleyball and men and women. So when volleyball seasons is here, these guys have to come out and get shots up when they can. These young ladies need to get shots up when they can. And so we're looking at an expansion into that parking lot, another gym, as well as new fresh space for our student-athlete academic area, student-athlete development area. So all great opportunities. None of these are like close to being announced that we're going to launch this campaign, but we want to know, if we had to do it, how much would it cost? And you have to go to a certain point to even know those numbers.
But in those 17 months or 18 months now that you've been here, you've already gotten a few things done. Here's an example of it, right?
Yeah, we're excited. We can turn the lights off at the Carter. A few of you might have been at West Virginia last year. We played a night game. That's a tough place to play. That's a tough environment. And at the first time out of the second quarter, all the lights in the stadium went out. It was pitch black. And to their credit, did something really cool. They were honoring the history of coal miners. And so these lights start blinking that look like a coal car is coming right at you. And I remember our offensive and defensive coordinators couldn't see their play sheets. I mean, it was a competitive advantage. And so turnabout is fair play. We're going to be turning off the lights at the Carter this fall. Some great stuff planned. I encourage you to be in your seat at the end of the third quarter as we start a new tradition between the third and fourth quarter. New video board is up and running. Awesome clarity on this thing. That'll be a new feature this year. Better updated stat graphics for Mike Singfield, who always wants to see the stats. And I mentioned our volleyball program, right? I mean, volleyball, I don't know if the volleyball team's ever been ranked preseason. They're number 18 in the country this year. And again, just a credit to Jason Williams and his staff and those young ladies. They played Vanderbilt the other night on this brand new TerraFlex court, which is it's like a yoga mat, much more safe, friendly to their knees and their hips and all those things. So yeah, a lot of good stuff cooking.
Yeah, and a lot to come as well. Let's dive into this next one because I like this slide here. This is expectations, essentially. This is what Mike Buddie wants to see and TCU wants to see out of every one of their programs. And we talked about this early on. And Mike, you want to see your teams in postseason, bottom line.
100%. Now, there are intricate caveats in all of these, right? Because not all of our programs are invested in at the same level. What's not written up here is how we define winning. It's how you treat your young people. It's how you treat your staff. It's how you represent Texas Christian University. Our biggest donor right now is TCU. They found a way to help us get this $20 million. I view that as the chancellor is our biggest donor. And our provost is our biggest donor because he tightened his belt to help make our efforts feasible. And we want to represent them well. So all of those things that should be on this slide, the way you represent your integrity, your character, how you treat young men and women, how you shepherd them through this new era of understanding personal finance, financial responsibility, and literacy, all that thing matters. But here's the bottom line, and this is my scoreboard. We want to be in the top 30 in the Learfield Directors Cup. Again, 33 is as high as we've ever been. We think we can do better. We want our graduation rates to be among the leaders. And postseason all sports. It's bold strategy, Cotton, but we're going to do it.
You can do it. That's exactly, yeah. So how can you help? And we're going to put it back on you a little bit, because obviously tonight we're here to answer your questions, give you the information that you want. But there are ways that everyone, and you mentioned this, you touched on it, everyone in this room can make a difference that leads to success at TCU.
It takes all ships. Historically, the athletics department provides complimentary tickets to our staff and our coaches. We also have a suite at Dickies Arena, so when there's a concert, we offer those tickets. 2 years ago, we made a decision that you don't qualify to receive free tickets unless you join the Frog Club. Our Frog Club people go door to door every day and ask you to invest as Frog Club members. If we're not doing it ourselves, which you can do for $8.33 a month, what are we doing? So now we can say, every single person that works in the athletics department at TCU is a member of the Frog Club. We'd like you to be a member of the Frog Club. Little efforts like that, and we've got our Frog Club people here, we've got our ticket sales people here, we've got a lot of our LEAP agency people who do NIL. We can all do something. And again, it doesn't have to be a check being written. But what we believe is, with 96,000 living alumni on the planet, if most of us are pulling in the right direction, great things happen. And so far, that's what we've seen.
The LEAP agency, I'll just touch on that real quick. I know we're going to get to some questions here, but there are ways that we in TCU Athletics can benefit many business owners in here as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. We want to partner with you.
Yeah.
Whether that's through a sponsorship with Learfield, if that's important to your business, or if it's you want Michael Robinson representing your company. Those are great opportunities. And what our LEAP folks do that's awesome is we don't want Xavier and Olivia Miles having to come out of class 3 times a week to film another graphic to put on their social media posts. We capture all of that before classes start. We kind of get them in all these action shots, and then we can Photoshop in the industry things, because we want them being college students. We don't want to interrupt that. And so about 50 or so people in that LEAP agency, from Nick Demento, who reads and writes the contracts and deals with agents, to Ryan, who's knocking on doors, Alex Yak and Jay Fields knocking on doors, trying to find people willing to say, I can do $5,000. We've got our young guns out there, Jack Stein, Riley Richards, Todd Wright's leadership, that are going door to door, knocking on businesses and saying, do you feel like, because of TCU's location here in Fort Worth, are they bringing you business that helps you pay your bills? If so, would you care to partner with the athletics department and help us continue to do that? So lots of great opportunities.
Yeah. Here's the bottom line. There's a lot going on, obviously. There's a lot going on in the world of college athletics. There's a lot of change out there, but there is a lot of energy around this program and a lot of effort going into maintaining the level that you've become accustomed to, that we've become accustomed to at TCU. And all of us in the room contribute to that, no matter, if you're just a one-time, once-a-year football fan for a game, all the way up to a major member of the Frog Club. You're important to us, and we wanted you to know that. So we want to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Mike Buddie, for that information and kind of laying it all out. Now it's your turn, though. Now you get to ask Mike anything you want. And again, he's going to try to be as transparent as he can, right?
Yes, they can also ask you a question.
Yeah, ask me one and you won't get an answer, yes.
And by the way, you're not glued to your seats. You can go get another beer. You can go get another bite to eat.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll be as candid as we can.
All right. Big E, you want this microphone, and we'll find some folks who.
If you ask a question, you get a hat.
That's right.
You get a Dublin hat.
Bob Simple in the front gets the first one. I like this.
First, I just want to reiterate what an asset you have in Brian Estridge. And I think he deserves a round of applause.
Who?
He's a winner there. What does your crystal ball say about conference realignment?
I'm sorry, conference realignment? Yeah. You know, it's interesting that somehow found its way into the Saving College Sports Act. You know, a lot of the impetus behind the act was to try to prevent, we think some of the impetus was to try to prevent a super conference from being formed. My view on conference realignment, I'm going to go deep here. I think football programs should be picked up and treated separately. If I could blow up the NCAA right now and start over, I would have football teams aligned by conference. I would have everybody else, and maybe men's basketball, but really just football. At my previous institution, the first 4 years I was there, we were an FBS independent. So our football team played whoever we wanted. And we played BYU, and we played UMass, and we played UConn, and we played Notre Dame. But the rest of our teams were in the Patriot League. And every single one of them got on a bus to Lehigh and Lafayette and Holy Cross. And so we didn't miss much class. And the experience was, I think, much better for those students. And I know as a Power 4 institution, it's not that simple. But that's what I would do. Because right now you got Stanford and Cal getting on an airplane on a Tuesday to go to Winston-Salem, North Carolina to play a soccer game. That just doesn't make sense to me. So the way it's written right now, you can't have more than 19 teams in a conference. Well, we have 16, the SEC has 16, the Big Ten has 18, the ACC has 17 and a half, depending on how you look at Notre Dame. And I don't know why they put an artificial cap on it, other than they just want to prevent a breakaway. I think things are pretty good the way they are. If we're fine being that far behind those schools in television deals, if we have a set cap on what you pay student athletes. We love where we are. I mean, I think we're in a great position in a great league that, again, if things go according to plan, we should be the bell cow in this league.
It was interesting, by the way, to see some of the schools that were against the cap in this legislation. That makes you think, does that mean you're looking around, that you're thinking about going to another league? That was interesting to see the Florida States and the Miamis of the world that were against it, right?
You can read the tea leaves.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing throughout this that I found interested is, and again, some of this is fact, some of it is rumor, some of the institutions that you would think would be the most okay with a fair fight are the ones who are most adamantly against having a fair fight. Who else wants a hat?
Me. Thank you for doing this. I'm a season ticket holder for most of the sports. My question is the TCU ticket pricing. Since you've been here, the prices have gone up significantly. Is there any plan for future for you to tell us that that's going to happen so we can plan accordingly and budget throughout the year?
Boy, that seems unfair to even ask. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah, I think Jeremiah set me up for that because there wasn't a price increase for like 4 or 5 consecutive years, and then he snuck out for Columbia, South Carolina in the middle of the night. I think that's a fair request. I think we can budget further into the future. I will say this, Art Sean Connors here, I won't point him out, but he's a guy with the cowboy hat. He does a great job of monitoring the national landscape in our league, and we are very competitively priced. Not that that matters to you. One of the things that we talked about is, you know, the people who sit in the upper deck at TCU, in my opinion, are probably our most loyal fans. They're parking 5 miles away, they're getting on a shuttle, they're sitting up there, there's no shade, there's very few concessions to be offered up there. How do we make that an affordable option, as well as maybe, help you plan for your budget? And I've seen you at every one of our sports, so thank you. You are truly loyal and present and visible, and our kids completely appreciate that, as do I. So I think we could probably I'll have Bennett dig into it and give us the next 15 years. I will say this, one of the things that we've talked about that Tennessee was first to the market to do, a $20 surplus on every ticket. And the $20, it's an NIL surcharge. $20 per ticket. What is Neyland Stadium, 104,000? That math adds up, and it doesn't go to Tennessee. It goes to their ticket broker, and then their ticket broker signs NIL deals for that amount, which is $20 times 104,000. Huge advantage, and I'm sure a lot of those people said, I don't want to pay for this, and I shouldn't have to pay $20. And I'm not saying we're going to do that, but that's one of the things we've talked about is, can we share this expense without forcing it on people? And those are really hard, tough decisions to have, to be having. But yes, to answer your question, we'll be more thoughtful and see if we can communicate earlier and maybe long term.
Is he allowed?
Oh no.
Is he allowed?
I am allowed. I came, I'm allowed. All right. Hey, Mike. You've talked a lot, obviously, about finances and how the university is trying to be prepared for whatever comes next. One of the things you mentioned was sponsorships, and what we've seen across the country are jersey patches for football and basketball and a lot of other sports. Just would love an update about TCU's progress in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and thanks for what you do covering us. It's great to have you. So the question is this jersey patch thing. Here's what's interesting. We have two incredible department partners. We have more than two, but two I want to specifically talk about. One is this little apparel company from the Pacific Northwest called Nike, whose CEO happens to be a proud Horned Frog. Another one right up the street here in Dallas is Learfield, who has been our multimedia rights partner for over a decade. Their CEO, a proud Horned Frog. So we're really fortunate to have people who not only are invested from a business strategy, but also invested personally. And what's interesting is Cole Gahagan, who runs Learfield, they did their best. They did their due diligence to try to predict how much does a jersey patch go for on a TCU jersey? Because there's no way of knowing. It's a complete guess. It's never been an option before. And so what we saw early with UNLV and Oklahoma State and some of these programs that were quick to the market, anywhere from $2.5 million to $5 million. Kansas had a pretty good deal. I think that was closer to $5 million to try to set the market. Well, at that time, we were in conversations with a few companies thinking, we think $3 to $3.5 million is probably the right amount. Unless you just happen to have somebody who's a Horned Frog or local or both that just really wants to have their logo on your uniform. And to be completely honest, those deals didn't come to fruition. At the time, I was disappointed because who doesn't want an extra $3 to $3.5 million? Well, recently, Ohio State came out, JP Morgan Chase, $17 million a year. And it's a long-term deal. I don't know if we know how long that deal is. So that was like, okay, that's more than $3 million. It's also Ohio State. Literally the next day, Notre Dame, $19 million. SoFi, partners with Notre Dame. Now those are iconic brands, I get it. But what it's told us is maybe $3.5 million is a little bit too low. And so we're not in active conversations right now, Jamie. The window has really closed for football season because these are 5 or 10-year deals. So we don't want to rush into something and try to iron on a jersey patch. But we do have spring sports as an opportunity. Jay Fields has kind of set aside, football, basketballs, baseball as a package, and then we can sell other jersey patches on our other sports. But we'll be able to spend the next 6 months being really thoughtful, strategic on how we partner with somebody for the jersey patch.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. Protect College Sports Act. What happens if this doesn't pass? What's the plan B? And because this already happened once before, like you said, with the House agreement. Yeah. And then part 2, I saw collective bargaining up on the slides. So is this a labor law conversation or is this a college sports conversation at this point? Because it seems like a labor law conversation that's going to be subject to National Labor Relations Board, all kinds of other stuff. So would you be comfortable with locking out college athletes if that was necessary?
Would I be comfortable doing that? As long as they're going to class, absolutely. It'll never get to that. And those are two really good questions. So I'll start at the back and work my way to the front. Collective bargaining was up there in quotations for a reason. What we learned was for 150 years, the NCAA was rigid and unchanging. It took an act of God to take something out of the NCAA rule book. And as you know, 6 years ago, we were talking about student athletes can be given a bagel and it can have peanut butter on it, but it can't have meat on it. That would be an impermissible, unapproved benefit. Like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, that was the conversation of stupidity that we were having. And what we've learned since then is if and when we have to change, we can change pretty quickly. We went from paying 0 to 20 million to 50 million potentially in 3 years. So I don't think collective bargaining is the right term, because collective bargaining means you're employees, I'm employer, but they can create some subset that brings student athletes to the table with representation that allows them to have a voice in the process. And so collective bargaining is not the right word or words, but what I believe personally is until we allow student athletes to come to the table, we're just going to continue to get sued. And once we all realize that, I think we'll be in a hurry to get student athletes to have a voice. Because right now we're saying $20.5 million. And you know what, all the student athletes, all of whom now have agents and or lawyers, the lawyers say, says who? Who came up with 20.5? And now they'll say 48.8, says who? Who came up with that number? My client didn't get to say that. He doesn't accept that as the acceptable cap. And I always use the country club comparison. Some of you belong to country clubs, and they have rules that say if you want to play golf here, you have to have a collared shirt and you can't wear cutoff jeans. That's the rules of that country club. That's what the NCAA used to be. If you want to wear a tank top and cutoff jeans, there are golf courses that will let you do it. It's just not this one. So these temporary restraining orders that say, hey, this 26-year-old should be able to come back and play a 7th year of college sports, I wish that the NCAA had the opportunity to say, you can absolutely play sports, just not at this country club. What was the first part of your question? Oh, yes, thank you. Yep. I agree. So there's a working group, ironically, right now. I happen to be the chairman of the Big 12 Athletic Directors Group, and I got a call from the commissioner a couple weeks ago, and he said, we're putting together a working group to come up with a plan B and C and D, assuming this doesn't work. So the conversations are happening at the 4 Power Conference office level. This is Mike Buddie's take. Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey and Brett Yormark and Jim Phillips have all agreed to this version of the Saving College Sports Act. They have all said, we think $48.8 million is enough and the right amount. Again, student athletes haven't said that, but we collectively have said 48.8, yeah, we can live with that. If the act doesn't pass, which I think you're handicapping that is probably pretty accurate, the CSC, as the enforcement entity, could say, we're lifting the 20.5 million up to 48.8. Now, that would be an alteration to the House settlement. So the lawyers, Kessler and Berman, who represented the defendant in that case, would have to approve it. And you would think that they would say, well, we agreed to 20 million was enough. So yeah, we're good with 48.8. But what they won't be good with, most likely, is that you can't do NIL above that. Because they don't believe in you should be able to restrict any earnings whatsoever. So that'll be the challenge. But I think we could still adopt some of those. Tommy Tuberville introduced, hey, instead of having a 62-page bill, what if you just said, you get 5 years to compete for 5 years, and you get antitrust exemptions? A little bit easier to swallow, and that could be another plan B.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, Brian, thanks for providing this forum. Really appreciate you and your staff taking the time to do it. We focus a lot, you hear every day about NIL and exponential growth in that revenue. You mentioned, though, or brought up real quickly, DraftKings, right? I'm curious if you could comment on current influence or impact of the gambling industry on college athletics, and maybe not just your athletic programs, but college campuses as a whole, and where you see that going in the future.
Well, I think it's an epidemic. It scares the daylights out of me. I know a lot of really, really good, educated, smart people that place 30 bets a day on their cell phones. And I'm not saying that uneducated people are those who gamble. It just scares the daylights out of me. And you know, again, for 150 years, those of you who own businesses, me and Greg Featherston fought like crazy to make sure our student athletes never have any interaction with you whatsoever, because nothing good can come of that. We used to walk through the parking lots of our football and basketball players when I was at Wake Forest thinking, I hope it's nothing but rundown Toyota Tercels and old Jeeps, because if you see a shiny Mercedes-Benz, you're like, that doesn't add up. Overnight, I'd love to get the keys to any one of the cars in the parking lot. And I walk through and say, those are nice, those are really nice looking cars. It doesn't concern me at all. What concerns me is, you know, there was a highly publicized gambling issue, and I'm the last person to throw stones. That kid's not the only student athlete in the country that's gambled on college athletics. It's physically, I mean, the numbers, it's impossible. I was a struggling minor league baseball player. I promise you back then, if that were an option, there would be guys on my team who knew that they could get 3 hits that night, but if maybe they just had an off night, could double their minor league paycheck. It's scary, and the people that are making money hand over fist are the people that are putting that on every one of our children's cell phones, whether you're a 9-year-old playing Words with Friends or a 55-year-old looking at Twitter. Like when you time out Kalshi, Polymarket, DraftKings, it's scary, it's regulated, but we still hold our breath every day. So the NCAA is concerned about prop betting in particular, which again, I honestly don't even follow it close enough to know, but I know you could bet on Xavier Edmonds winning the opening tip. Who's going to score the first bucket? I mean, it's crazy. You can gamble on how long the national anthem is going to be at a minor league baseball game, which I always thought, man, if I'm the person singing the national anthem, I'm going to put $100,000 down on it, and I'm going to nail it. So it scares me, and again, it scares me as a human being as much as it scares me as an athletics director.
Get one in the front here.
What you got, Jim? I'll repeat it.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about gambling as well. But is there any concern about the Big Ten or SEC, the big boys sitting there saying, I'm not going to play ball, I'm going to take my ball and go home and form my own? The NCAA seems to be ineffective in recent years. And so if they don't want to listen to the NCAA, do they form their own? I mean, is there a concern of them, as I say, taking their own ball and going home and not playing with everybody else?
Yeah, my colleague from Iowa State, who announced his retirement about a month ago, had a great response to that. And the question was, am I concerned that the SEC is going to take their ball and go home? So Jamie Pollard said, I wish you would. Enough with the threats. If you're going to do it, do it. But don't think for a second that your baseball team is going to play any of these baseball teams, and your soccer team's not going to play any of these soccer teams, and your volleyball teams aren't going to play any of these volleyball teams. And so now you've got this league of 19 super successful athletic programs that are just kind of playing themselves. And Greg Sankey, in his defense, was a little bit taken out of context. He never said, I want to take my ball and go home. What he said was, if we can't figure out a way to govern ourselves, it might have to fall to the commissioners of each league to govern themselves at the league level. And that was what Greg meant, because he's smart enough to know we need the Gonzagas and the Villanovas in basketball season, and, you know, Marshall and Akron in soccer season. Like, that's what makes college athletics really exciting. So no, I'm not worried about that. And again, if we could just get back to where we were, let's pay these young people a really handsome wage, and let's let the $400 million budget schools build Taj Mahals and pay their coaches whatever they want to pay them. But let's let the people on the field have a somewhat level opportunity. That we would be thrilled with that.
It's me again. Just one more. Again, in the midst of all of this, there have been a lot of universities that have had hard conversations about contracting athletics, or, you know, removing scholarships from sports or taking sports away altogether. Have there been those kinds of conversations at TCU?
We have those conversations every week. We had those conversations every week, my 4 years at Furman and my 6 years at West Point. Any good CEO or leader of a program looks every day at every option. Here's the sticky wicket of TCU, and frankly, every school that I've worked at for the most part. When the House settlement was enacted, they did away with this foolish, you can have 11.7 scholarships in baseball, and you can have 34 people on the roster. To their credit, they said, you can have 34 people on your roster. Give them all full scholarships if you want. So there were some schools in our league, Central Florida, Cincinnati, University of Texas, not in our league, who almost the next day said, we're going to the full scholarships across all of our sports. No shade on those institutions. Full scholarships at those institutions are a fraction of what a full scholarship at TCU is. So we have not gone to the maximum across the board, because our full scholarship is about $88,000 a year. Others are about $22,000, $21,000 a year. So we have to be very strategic in how we invest our revenue share dollars, but also how we share scholarships. And so, yeah, again, I inherited a plan that was begun by Jeremiah that was really helpful. Quite frankly, I came here from West Point, and we don't have NIL, and we don't have rev share, and they don't have a transfer portal, and was just blessed to have inherited the guys sitting behind you and a couple others who helped steward say, this is what our plan with Jeremiah was. And there were some scholarship tweaks in there, 100%. And we changed some of the plan as we learned what Houston was doing in basketball and what Tech was doing in football, so that we could maximize the impact of our plan. But yeah, we looked at all that stuff.
If the PCSA or some solution doesn't get passed, or some resolution doesn't happen, do you see schools cutting non-revenue sports so that they can slim down their athletics budget? And then college athletics have gotten really far away from where the NCAA's mission statement was, and then you're cutting the ability to learn these life lessons and experience college athletics for so many kids?
Yeah, excellent question. People are scared to death to cut sports. My first job at my alma mater, working at Wake Forest, I remember talking to the athletic director, because I had a donor from the Northeast who said, Wake Forest should add lacrosse. It'd be perfect, like it's perfect for lacrosse. And I went to the AD and I said, kind of makes sense. And he said, until we fund all 16 of our existing sports as well as we can possibly do and allow them to be as competitive as they can, there's no way we're going to add another sport. If you gave every athletic director in the Power Four truth serum and said, if the NCAA changed the minimum amount of sports from 16 to 7, would you do it? They would say, from a business standpoint, absolutely. Fortunately, I think there's enough of us who believe in the power of education through sport that they wouldn't. What I think you might see is, and this is directly related to what Jamie was trying to get at, don't drop the sport, but maybe you reduce the scholarships. Because sadly, if everybody does that, you don't lose a competitive edge. But what you do lose is first generation college students who used to use tennis or golf as a way to get that education. That's what worries me probably the most.
I know TCU had with a more female students, had a Title IX issue, and curious where that is, and to this question before about other sports and having to add more sports to comply.
Yeah, we're horrible at TCU in terms of Title IX because every young woman in the country wants to come here, and they're all stinking brilliant. It's a tightrope, and we're 64% of our undergraduate enrollment is female. And what we have done is we're vigilant to try to make sure that we're showing progress, trying to meet the standards in one of the three prongs in Title IX, but we've embraced it. I mean, one of our strategic plan pillars is invest and succeed in women's sports. Like, duh, if this is where young women especially, are attracted to, why don't we attract the best and the brightest and the most talented athletes? And, again, you look at soccer going to the Final Four, first time ever, back-to-back Elite Eights, first time ever. Beach volleyball, only school in the history of beach volleyball national champions, not from the state of California. Women's tennis. So it's working. Do I wish that we could get closer to 50-50? Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I think strategically we're trying to add programs, and we keep surveying young people like, hey, if TCU added a sports management program, would that be attractive to you? 70% of the women say yes. So yeah, it's a problem from a Title IX standpoint, but I think it's fantastic that that's the culture, and we're going to capitalize on it and start winning national championships on the women's side.
Anything else?
I need a beer.
All good? I got one more to close it out. Strong now.
Thanks, Mike and Brian. My question was just your previous experience. I think most in the room probably respect our military. Any life lessons from West Point that you're able to carry to Fort Worth and our young student athletes?
Well, two things to say. One is I never served a day in my life, but I had the honor of working at West Point. Second thing is the man to my right raised somebody who raised his hand to serve his country. Pretty cool. Congratulations. Air Force pilot and a hell of a right-handed pitcher. Right-handed pitcher? What I loved about my time at West Point, and I was ready to go, and we sprinted to Fort Worth, don't get me wrong. Young people that walk around every day without a cell phone, look you in the eye, good morning, sir, and fight through adversity. I feel really good about the future of our country because of what I saw, not just at Army. I mean, I hate Navy, I want to beat them, but those kids are just as incredible. Same with Air Force. I mean, they're all the same cut, and our country's getting, it's fewer and further between to find 18-year-old kids who are like, yeah, I want to get up at 5:30 every morning and crawl through the mud and get yelled at. So we're lucky to have them, and from character development, leadership, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, just these little snippets that you see in action. I was probably fat, lazy, and kind of entitled when I got there, and I walk through TCU and I pick up trash now. I didn't used to do that. Just little things like that rub off on you. So thanks to you and your son. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. We got one more question. I hope you're all going to go to Dublin and watch. Dang, we're recording this. We're facing Bill Belichick and his North Carolina Tar Heels. I hope it goes our way.
Mr. Buddie, we got one more for you. Do you know of an answer on, are we ever going to get the spikes back?
What's a spike? I'm kidding. I knew there would be somebody from the message boards here, but I don't think it's you, Jack. So the question is about the spikes on our uniforms. It is a hot topic. So I mean, 8 or 9 months ago, I called our friends at Nike and I said, I think it's unanimous that our fan base wants those spikes back. I don't know why they went away or when they went away. It doesn't matter. And they said, we agree. We wondered why those went away. So they are back in production. Sadly, Nike's got a ton of international responsibilities, but starting next year, 2027 football season, the old spikes on the uniforms will be back. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
All right. Go Frogs. Thank you all for being here.